Welcome to IdeaGen TV. I'm your host, Ed Reno, and this is a show where we talk about authentic leadership, the purpose and potential behind leaders and how they operate within their organizations. Today we have as our guest Donald Alway, the Assistant Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the division that he leads is the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate. Don, welcome.
Thank you, Ed.
Don, in a town where there are titles that have some pop, yours is one of the most impressive titles I actually have come across. Can you tell us what you do at the Directorate of WMD?
So the WMD Directorate is a relatively new division, sits inside the FBI's National Security Branch. So after 9/11, the National Security Branch was formed, and as a branch within a bureau concept. So it is a division that sits alongside counterterrorism and counterintelligence. And together, the three divisions work on some of the nation's most significant national security threats.
Are they housed together for a reason? We talk here at IdeaGen about collaboration and the power of that collaboration. Is there a reason why you're bunched together?
Absolutely. So all of the operational divisions within the FBI work very closely together. The three I mentioned, in addition to the cyber division and criminal division, we have natural connections all across the country, across all different sub-programs. Those three divisions, though, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, WMD, really are kind of born out of necessity in different points in time. The WMD Directorate is 15 years old. Traditionally, those threats that we are responsible to mitigate were managed from those other divisions. So post 9/11, we really took a look to see that are we addressing all the gaps in WMD. There's a counterterrorism aspect to WMD, and then there's counterintelligence aspect. Those were pulled out and placed in one unique division, but still considers ourselves partners to those other divisions.
And I would, 9/11, seminal moment in global history, certainly American history. So I understand that sort of callous. We are obviously now, present day, experiencing a little bit of a swing back to nation-state threats. You think of the Russia-Ukraine war. How are you all viewing that sort of conflict? And is there a role for the FBI?
There is, primarily through our partnerships. So we have provided support, both investigatively, laboratory assistance, evidence collection techniques, training, equipment, and joint investigations with a variety of countries around the world that may not have the same experience or expertise that we're fortunate enough to have within the FBI. So there's often a request for mutual assistance in both a law enforcement capacity and in our role as members of the intelligence community.
I see. And so how much of your weight do you put on preventative and then, as you say, building a case that someone could eventually go to court with?
Sure. So we invest heavily into the term, ironically called left to go. So when we try to invest in the prevention element, that's about building relationships, building initiatives, educating partners, academia, the public about the risk from WMD. When those initiatives, tripwires, and outreach fail, and an event is potentially going to happen, we'll initiate an investigation. And unfortunately, when something does happen, then we'll initiate a full response. Again, oftentimes in partnerships with other elements of the FBI and state, local, and other federal partners.
I see. And what kind of organization does that take? I would imagine you have a footprint across the globe. What's your workforce look like, and how's it deployed?
So we've got a WMD specialist in every one of our 56 field offices. We also have a variety that sit in some more sub-offices. But in addition to those domestic specialties, we've got folks situated in key embassies around the world that do very similar role, building partnerships, liaison, outreach, training with our partners. And they're kind of a regional resource, and they cover a wide swath of territory.
Mm-hmm. And they're, I would imagine, teams of these individuals in the embassies, if you will, and in the field offices. Are they subject matter experts, or how does one become a WMD sort of proficient agent?
Sure, we refer to them as WMD coordinator. Really, the name says it all. Right? They coordinate the efforts in anything around WMD. They do get certifications that we provide. They get an incredible amount of training. We equip them with specific equipment, But their primary benefit is the expertise they bring as a seasoned FBI agent of conducting investigations, understanding the potential for intelligence gathering, collection, sharing, and building relationships both in the embassies with partner U.S. government agencies and with foreign partners that we are fortunate enough to be with.
Is there any particular threat that keeps you up right now?
Well, of course, you can see what's happening in Ukraine, so things can get from bad to worse quickly. You know, any type of conflict can introduce a lot of countries may see that from a state-sponsored aspect, they may see having a form of WMD in their stockpiles gives them a certain type of advantage over their adversaries. It also creates a cycle for their adversaries. In this instance, when we hear about what's going on in Ukraine, that we all experience domestically our own sense of psychological fear back in 2001 from the anthrax scares, which legitimate anthrax did kill a significant number of Americans, because more than one is too many. But most people around the country changed their pattern of behavior. They have concerns about what they do, where they go. And we're seeing that now around the world, that countries that espouse to use or possess WMD are looked at differently.
I see. And, you know, at the higher ranks of the FBI, or the highest ranks of the FBI where you reside, you have counterparts interagency, I would imagine, that you're working with as well. You talk a little bit about the pressure that goes down on a culture, on a society when they have these threats presented to them. To me, that's a little bit of a balance of the emotional, not just the work. What are you trying to communicate, if you will, out to the Americans and to your workforce around this job, this work product?
I think it's important for us to know that there is an extensive network of agencies and public safety organizations that have incredible capacity to respond and mitigate any one of the threats that we may have been presented. Everything right from toxic chemicals that someone could buy at store and use in small scale attack, up to including if there's a threat of an improvised nuke device or dirty bomb. If you talk about the fear of dirty bombs, there's a very, very robust and capable response element across the government, ready to interdict and mitigate that if it were.
And that's where you're your residence right now as the leader of this organization. You're constantly, I would imagine, having meetings and discussions, not only with their domestic counterparts, but all your international counterparts.
There's great resources within DHS, within the Department of Defense, that all work together. We exercise how we would manage these threats together, who would bring what to the table. No one agency has all the resources and all the answers.
I see. Fascinating. And I have to ask, from a movie, I sort of have this idea from the movies, is there a secret lab somewhere where you're thinking through, trying to be one step ahead of the bad guys and identifying maybe what the next threat looks like?
So we don't do that in a lab, but that does occur often. Our folks train for what we consider over-the-horizon threats. As an example, we started looking at the potential for drones, UAVs, to be used as a delivery vehicle years ago, before they really became as prolific they are now. So we're looking at areas where how can something that has dual use that exists in our society, that's a critical element of, let's say, a sector commercially, how could that be used to deliver some form of WMD as a weapon?
I see. One of the powers of IdeaGen, I think we all see, is that there is a collaboration across membership. You have people from corporate all the way down to service-oriented enterprises. So in that vein, how do you work with the private sector? Do you work with the private sector? How critical are they to you?
They might be the most critical relationship we have. Most of this country's critical infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector. Our academia, our research, all of that exists in the private sector and not the government. And so our job is to really partner to help educate private sector partners on where risk exists, how we can work jointly to mitigate them, and then something occurs, how we can interdict and stop it.
If that's the what and the why, maybe we can go into sort of the who. How did you, is this sort of living your best self right here? I mean, did you sit back a couple of years ago in your career and say, I want to be running the Directorate of WMD?
Yeah.
And was that your college goal?
So I don't think I really knew that this was a risk factor, right? Like many Americans, we grow up believing that that these type of threats don't really exist because we don't see them every day in front of us. See, that was a time ago, the anthrax, before we saw things like ricin used as an assassination agent in this country. So no, to answer your question, I began my career in the FBI working against drug organizations, primarily Mexican and Colombian drug cartels, fugitive violent crime matters. Really, I was on the criminal investigative side and had very limited knowledge of what went on in the national security side. That's what we refer to as the other side of the wall. So within the FBI, we had two distinct sides. Some worked in national security and some worked in criminal. When we had partnerships, we didn't have the cohesion we have now. So I was unaware that what this would bring in terms of opportunity and a sense of satisfaction.
Interesting. And so you started out your career thinking you were going to go get bad guys, drug dealers in this case. How did that then track through to today?
I think for a lot of us, 9/11 was that moment when so many of us left the criminal investigative program and moved into counterterrorism, which was my first migration. That, again, as I made a reference, the WD Directorate didn't exist at the time, so those portions of the threats were managed by our counterterrorism division. When it came to the actors, the domestic or international terrorists attempting to use or acquire WD. On the other side, the counterterrorism division managed many of the state-sponsored issues when a country was trying to build a program and we had no interest in trying to stop that. So I think my migration came through the counterterrorism side until the formation of the WD Directorate when I taken a leadership role.
I see. And was that the immediate leap from counter-terror straight to WMD, or were there a few stops along the way?
There was one stop in between. I think in my second promotion within the organization, where I served as the unit chief of the WMD Immigration Unit, whose responsibility was to build cohesion between the FBI and the CIA, sitting in their space and blending those two cultures together.
Yeah, and I think what I was referring to is also, I think at one point you were asked and had the privilege of running the training facility for the FBI.
Yeah.
Describe that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Much later in my career, after moving around a few different parts of the country, I was fortunate enough to lead our training division, which sits in Quantico, where our academy and our leadership programs sit. Probably one of the most rewarding parts of my career, seeing folks show up at the academy ready to serve, leaving oftentimes very lucrative, great jobs, to come stand shoulder to shoulder with partners and allies they've never met, but to kind of in a unified sense of purpose and mission to protect the American people and the Constitution.
As we explore leadership, that's an interesting place I want to sort of check in for a moment. So you have what I'll call type A's. They must be alphas. Certainly very mission-driven, goal-oriented, high operators. What's your leadership sort of style around that type of individual, and how do you sort of instill a sense of purpose and culture when you've got some very dynamic, very probably strong individuals?
Sure, it really is a team sport. Leading leaders is probably the best way to describe it. Where we have folks that generally, they may have come from highly accomplished careers, are successful, and now it's merging that talent, that passion, into a common grouping with a shared purpose. So I think my job, right, is to hire the right people, support them, arm them with the right resources, and let them do what they likely already should have the organization to do and have grown into, which is purpose-driven leaders.
I see. And do you find that there's any sort of particular skill set for successful agents nowadays? I mean, that may have changed over the many years you've been in the Bureau?
I think having people that want to see their own success through the success of the organization, right? So we rely on kind of measuring ourselves by some metrics at times. I mean, we're an organization like many others that relies to show our value or back to Congress for resourcing. However, that's not the purpose of why we do what we do. So I think having folks that are servant-based leaders that believe in the power of teams and that want to see success, their own success, measured by how well their subordinates do, those are the type of leadership qualities we're looking for on these spouse.
I see. And what are the statements that people are coming to the Bureau, applicants, and or successfully been recruited into the organization? Patriotism?
Right? Sense of mission, that being, right, to protect their fellow citizens, to do good for a living, to leave an organization better than they found it, and a genuine sense of calling. Right? It is not a job. It is maybe not even a career. It is a calling. There's going to be sacrifices. There's going to be hardships. That all comes with also a very rewarding experience that can't be measured by dollars.
There's a push, I think, globally, understandably, to further diversify workforces. Does the Bureau have an approach to diversifying its workforce and tapping into the power that comes from different backgrounds and approaches to things? So
we're an organization of people. While we use technology to accomplish our mission, there would be no FBI without the people behind it. We can't use systems to replace people really in any area. We can use technology to assist people. And so those folks have to have a sense of commitment, of belonging. And if we're not reflective of the public we serve, if we don't have folks that understand that the FBI is theirs, that it belongs to everybody, then we're failing the country, we're failing the organization. So sense of diversity in both the work and the people is critical to our success.
Are there programs that you've instituted that you can think of that are making that possible?
There are, and I think we look to find ways to engage with people that may not have thought of the FBI as a place for them. Mm-hmm. So we're going to organizations that have highly accomplished professionals that represent a subset of the country that isn't represented well in the FBI. We go to their organizations and we talk about what we are, what we do, and oftentimes I think just those conversations, exposure, shows folks that there is a place for everybody in the FBI.
I see. And as you look to accommodate perhaps certain sort of lifestyles, again, from that diversity standpoint, I think of, for instance, maybe someone who's coming in and wants to have a family or their work-life balance, and yet you say, and understandably, the job's a 24-hour live-it type of job. Is there room for someone who wants to be involved and engaged but may not be able to commit the 24/7 work cycle, if you will?
Yeah, and we try to ensure that our folks take care of themselves as they take care of the organization. And if we burn out our population by working on hours and schedules, so we try and have wellness programs and things that involve their families, so the families can see what the organization is about and they can feel connected, part of the mission. Serving is not one person's responsibility, it's an entire family. I mean, everybody is participating in some form or fashion by being that force behind the employee.
Yeah. By the way, I got a side check on that here. How do you sleep at night, given your role and responsibility? I mean, literally, maybe not even just the emotional aspect of it, but you got to have a 24/7 operation.
So we have, I have trust in my team. So I've got unbelievable subordinate staff, and I use that term only as a description, right? It is a team environment. So I've got a deputy AD who runs a component of our operations and our intelligence cadres, and then some senior executives that run components of our division. I put a lot of confidence in their ability to manage those and to alert me when they need my specific involvement or when something's going to require the deputy director to be advised or to have a larger interagency involvement. Many times, so they have the same trust and confidence in their team, and they're able to mitigate threats at various levels. Which at those positions, which I've served in all of them, there's a rotation, right? So somebody is on for a week. It's a tough week, right? You're taking every call, every threat, and then you're off cycle, right? And you're getting some time to take a week of vacation. And we encourage people to take advantage of everything we have to try and keep the balance in check.
That's very important, I would think, for sure. Yeah. I was going to ask you about sort of, you've come to this position now. Is there a next step, or where does this all lead?
This is, we all talk about we serve at the pleasure of the director. And so there is, when I was asked to take this division over, I was very happy in my role in the trade division. But my responsibility is to serve where needed. And, I've been eligible to retire for a period of time. However, I can't think of anything that'd be more rewarding to me right now than to stay in the organization until such time when I age out with a mandatory retirement age.
Okay. Well, Don, thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to the men and women of the FBI, keeping America safe and protecting us all. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.